So, Ken, we're going to talk about the topic of criticism. How well do you take criticism?
I take it very well. I've been criticized my entire life. Having an African dad is just criticism after criticism, so nothing new for me.
Has there ever been a time you were combative when you were giving criticism?
Um, no, I'm not usually combative up front when I was giving criticism. Um, I do field questions when I receive the criticism when I feel like it's unjust. There are times where people will criticize and it's not worthy criticism, or they may have gotten me mixed up with someone else, but I've never been like combative directly. Most of my criticism have been people who are senior or more experienced than me, so being combative in those situations could have basically cost me my job or cost me the opportunity that I was in.
Has there ever been a time you gave criticism that was taken the wrong way by the individual receiving it?
Yes, personal relationship, wife now, I've given her criticism about certain things, and I feel like you know over time I've worked on how I critique and how we critique each other, but I feel like the way in the moment when I was critiquing her, it was coming from a field of area of anger, so it might have came off the wrong way, but I could have adjusted how I worded a lot of the things I was critiquing her about. And I've also had it in the workspace. I was a manager before, and I had to critique someone's work, um, and they were offended with what I said, um, because they felt like what they were doing was more than what I was saying. They felt where I was telling them they was falling short. They didn't believe they were falling short there. I showed them the evidence, and they was like, but they're comparing themselves to someone else who was also underperforming at the time. So they were against my critique because this other person was doing the same thing, even though that doesn't make it any better for their circumstance as well.
What is the psychology behind why people get offended when they get criticized?
I think I think the psychology behind it is selfishness. Not as in like they're a selfish person, but like us in general as a person, you always feel like you want to put your best foot forward. And when someone says you're not, or someone is critiquing you for not, maximizing your potential or doing the best you can, you kind of get offended because you could feel like you are in the moment, but you're not observing what you're doing. You're looking from what you're doing, but you're not seeing the effects of it amongst everyone else. So it's like you need that eye of someone outside of your body telling you, "Hey, you're slacking here, you're being lazy here, you need to pick it up." Sometimes we have self realization moments that we are, and we self critique, but for the most part, we always feel like we're doing our best, even though we might not be in that moment.
There's constructive criticism and then there's regular criticism. So, does that mean that regular criticism is viewed as destructive?
Um, no, I think constructive criticism can be the destructive criticism. I think regular criticism is just kind of generalizing how someone is doing. Like, so I can say, "Hey, man, you've been lazy all week. You haven't gone to the gym." That's just regular criticism. Now, when it comes to constructive criticism, "Hey, man, you've been lazy, not going to the gym. You're not hitting your protein count. Man, you just been sitting around not doing nothing." That's very like a thought out constructive criticism, but you're being in a destructive manner because you're giving more details and adding more to it. To kind of deval. I won't say it's in a sense devaluing the person, but addressing where they're falling short in life.
Is there a direct correlation between those that have thick skin taking criticism pretty well?
Yeah, I think the people who have thick skin take criticism pretty well because they've been criticized a lot. They've dealt with a lot of destructive criticism throughout their lives, so that when certain things come up, they know how to deal with it. Like that goes back to kind of how you were raised. A lot of people's parents will heavily critique them and make comparisons to them on how other people are performing, like other kids, and that's how you end up building that thick skin. Terry might get all A's and you didn't get all A's because you were struggling with math, and your mom made that comparison, and then constantly having to go through that battle of being critiqued of not being the best, even though you're trying your best, does help you build that thick skin over time.
Do you need to be self aware on how to tell someone something in a unique way that's not going to get them upset?
Yes and no. I feel like sometimes you do have to be self aware just because of who you're dealing with. You don't want to agitate. You know, the what's the saying? You don't want to poke the bear. Some people can take destructive criticism at all in a bad way and get violent. Others take it well, so you have to kind of be self aware of who you're talking to, who you're critiquing, to make sure that you're not poking the bear. And even for those, some people, they don't just get violent. Some people, that's very impactful for their mental state at that very moment. Like, you could be going through a lot at work, and then you have your one-on-one with your manager, and then at home, you're having issues with your significant others, things of that nature, and then here comes your manager. Hey, you're not logging on time. You never do this. I need you to do that. And you need to do that, and you're going through all this criticism with already not being in a good mental space. It can bring your lows even lower than where you are at that moment.
Can criticism ever be objective, or is it always influenced by personal bias?
Um, I think it's always influenced by personal bias. The reason I say that is because when you're getting critiqued, it's based on someone's expectations and guidelines of where they expect you to be. It's never based on where they're supposed to be. You know what I'm saying? How can I put it? So even in the workplace, right? When you're getting critiqued, if you're just underperforming, when you're getting critiqued, it's still going to be harsher than it really is because they still have expectations for you. If you're doing well, but you're not doing at the standard that you should be, it's still going to be somewhat harsh because that person has certain expectations for you. So every criticism it is, it's more of a personal bias because it's coming from someone building out an idea of who you're supposed to be or what you're supposed to be in that moment, and never coming from, like, there's no real standard of where you're supposed to be in life unless you're just not doing nothing altogether. It's always just you're falling short for where they're expecting you to be or what they're expecting you to do.
How does self esteem affect how someone handles criticism?
A lot. Self esteem plays a big part because if you have low self esteem, criticism will maybe make you spiral. Someone can, you could be someone that you feel like you're doing your best at the moment, and then someone says, "Bro, you're not doing nothing. You're not doing enough." And then now you're like disappointed in all the efforts you've made, and now you're in the sunken place. You're feeling depressed because you've been getting up all morning to go to the gym, and a lot of times that's why I said this is a personal bias because you do things that people don't see. So their critique is only from what they see. So it's really a personal bias of what they're seeing. So they don't know all the back end work you've done to kind of get to the point you are. They only know what you show them when they're there. So having low self esteem could make you spiral. Having high self esteem can even knock those down that feel high, that are doing a lot, and then they get harshly criticized. Not all of a sudden they're questioning all the efforts that they've done and trying to make an adjustment there and sending them into a spiral. But it can also boost you because if the criticism is just and aligns where you are self-aware of where you are as a person, it helps you know that, okay, well, then I know that I'm falling short here, and they can see that too. Then I need to pick up the slack because now everyone else is seeing what I see.
How do you think different cultures handle criticism?
I feel like, no offense to Americans, I feel like a lot of Americans don't handle criticism well. Um, just because of all of these movements to kind of coat a lot of American ideology. Um, you know, I won't say it's coddled the way America has moved now. There's a lot of coddling going on in comparison to people from more of a foreign background. Our criticisms is much harsher because we have higher expectations from where we're from and experience. And Americans, for most, just think of it in general, most Americans who are actual Americans that are born here, your criticism is different because you grew up here. So you've already had those chances and those opportunities just from being here. We have harsher criticism because we're not from here. So we already have a step below you that we have to attain. So when we're falling short, it's much harder because we're already coming from a harder space in comparison.
How do celebrities, athletes, and those you see in the media handle criticisms in their day-to-day life? For example, if LeBron has a poor performance, people are going to flood his latest IG post and state how he's not the GOAT. And let's say for a Hollywood celebrity, someone like Brad Pitt, let's say he's part of a movie that wasn't top selling. Since he was formerly married to Angelina Jolie, people may flood his social media profiles and state how that's probably why Angelina Jolie left him. So how do you think these big time names handle criticism?
I think that's why a lot of them go through therapy. They get criticized on every aspect of their life. LeBron's a great father. He plays great in games. He's an example of how athletes should carry themselves. But his shortcomings on the court is always maximized over the influence on impact on what he's actually doing as an individual. Um, One of my favorite athletes, Giannis, had a perfect interview when they lost in the playoffs. When they asked him, "Do you count this season as a failure?" And he said, if you go to work every day and you perform your best, right, and then today you don't perform your best, does that mean you're a failure? That's really it. They face criticism for every small thing. A loss is a loss. You lose in every sport. You lose in life in general. So they're put on more of a microscope on all of their losses in life, especially athletes and in entertainment. So they can go through. They can't have people in those spaces can't have a bad marriage. Where millions of Americans and millions of people have bad marriages. You have a bad marriage, all of a sudden they're critiqued about, man, maybe he was a bad father, maybe he was a bad husband, or maybe he didn't spend time with, all these other things that come up that are not relevant to their personal life because they're under a microscope.
Can social media make people more critical or more vocal?
Both. Both. I think more critical because the visibility. More people are seeing everything you do now. If you're posting it, I guess it can go two ways. So it's more critical if you're actively engaging in social media. If you're someone that's always posting and you're doing stuff. If you notice all of the people who are actively on social media, over time they start to curate what their social media look like and what you see from them because they're being very critical on what they post and what they're showing. So that when you do critique them or what's your thought process of them, you only see these fine specific moments of their lives. Now, it does force people to be more vocal because if you post, let's say, for instance, you have a party and you don't invite one of your closest friends, right? Now you post on social media, he has that opportunity to say, yo, Andrew, why wasn't I invited? What's going on? Why am I not there? And more people are more vocal in that sense of they have a forum where they can just address their grievances and say what they need to say, even though they're, necessarily don't have the, what's the word I'm looking for? The position or title to do so.
Has cancel culture prevented the way people give and receive criticism?
No, I think cancel culture is the reason why criticism is more heightened. I think because of cancel culture, more people pay attention to the small, minute things that everyone does. So they look for avenues to cancel people. So the critiques are more harsh now because you can't say you slightly disagree. You can't sit in between. You have to be on one side or the other. And that's because of cancel culture because it's like, are you pro LGBT or not? You can't just say, hey, I like LGB, but I'm not with T. Now it's like, oh, you're just against all of them. There's no real balance there. So you get critiqued for having an ideology that's not idealistic to what everyone agreed to. And it's not just picking a specific side that you want to stand on in there. So it's amplified and it's giving people more voice to critique how your actions move. Or like, for instance, a perfect example of it is the whole Meghan and Tory thing. Everyone had to answer on if they agree with Meghan or not. If you didn't agree with Meghan, feminine and women rejected you. If you said, oh, let's just let all the evidence come out, you were critiqued and said, oh, you don't believe women when women get hurt. Even though if there was the opposite gender, if a man got shot in that manner, they would have said, let's just wait for the evidence to be out. You see what I'm saying? So the cancel culture has made it so that your decisions and where you want to stand on certain situations, you got to be very critical on it, and you'll be critiqued for just being slightly on one side versus being slightly on the other side.
I like how you use the Megan and Tory situation because it's like if you sided with Tory during that time, it's you know you they viewed you as a potential woman beater.
Yeah.
Whereas if you side with Megan, it's like you're for women rights. You're given more leeway in the media. Describe can someone go too far when receiving criticism?
Yes. Um, I was watching a video and a lady said, destructive criticism is when people say never and it making it personal and using a third party to describe your the issues, your shortcomings. I think someone can go too far, specifically when they involve a third party in describing and criticizing you. So that's where I come. That's why I say like as with your parents when they make that comparison of what you've been doing compared to your peers. That's when I feel like criticism goes too far because now you're not just criticizing what I'm doing, you're criticizing me against what other people are doing who have different circumstances, which is unfair. Um, Criticism works when it's idealistically just on the person and not pointing out just the person's shortcoming, but also pointing where they do well. But if it's just a situation where you're just speaking on the negatives and then adding a third party to compare your negatives to their positives, that's when I feel like criticism gets too far and it's not really criticism anymore. It's more like bashing the person for their shortcomings.
Can criticism ever be correlated with bullying?
Yes. Um, and not in the sense of bullying like picking at someone, but bullying as a way to like say, hey, you're not good at this. Like a manager, when you have your one on one, I feel like a lot of times managers bully you in the corner, especially when they're critiquing you um, in those one on ones. Because there's things you fall short at work, everyone does. There's areas you can't just be an expert at everything. But then they use those opportunities when you have those one on ones. I'm not saying all managers, but a lot of managers to point out, hey, you can't do this. Hey, you don't do this. You don't know how to do this well. This is what you do. And then managers, they always bring a third party because where you have shortfalls in your work life, they always say, oh, this person is good at this. You should go talk to them or you should go sit with this person so you can learn from them because they do this well. Not knowing that, their entire team's not good at everything. Everyone has their strengths. Let them work to their strengths and just kind of guide them at their strengths to keep improving the team overall. A lot of managers don't do it in that manner.
Describe a time someone took criticism and converted it into a personal or professional life growth.
Um, the time that someone took criticism, I think me. I give an example for me. I had a one-on-one with my manager at one of my jobs, and she told me I try to do too many things at once, um, which I do because I want to. I used to want to be a jack of all trades and be able to do a lot. Um, and she said, you can do a lot of stuff in parts, but you can never complete the whole process because you try to learn the whole thing instead of mastering one thing at a time and then building from there. Um, that advice and that critique on how I handle my workload and doing my job helped me because now I had dwindled down on what I'm really good at and just continue to get better at that and everything else will kind of follow suit along the way. So taking that critique on me trying to be the jack of all trades and just focusing on one thing kind of helped my trajectory career wise because now I became an expert at that one thing I was really good at.
What was the harshest criticism you ever received from your parents?
Whew. The harshest criticism I received from my parents, be from my dad. He's my harshest critic. I tell everyone. When I finished school, I didn't. When I finished college, I didn't want to go to law school. And I told him kind of my plans of what I wanted to do in life beyond college. Um, and he basically uh, said I was going to be a failure. To shorten it, to not give all the details, but he basically said I was going to be a failure because what I was pursuing wasn't money forward, and he didn't believe it would be able to sustain my family long term. But he didn't see the vision. He just was critiquing the idea of what I was giving him that I was about to do. And he's never done any research on what I wanted to do or have any experience in that field of what I wanted to do. So his critique was coming from a place of, I would say it was destructive, but it was a place of fear of me not, being able to provide for my family or doing more. So that was the harshest critique. He literally, we sat and talked for, I think it was close to like 2 hours about everything and kind of looked at every scenario. And he critiqued even my degree path and how I performed in school. Because when I was in college, they didn't send my family report cards or nothing. So when I graduated, my dad wanted to see my transcript. When he saw my transcript, he saw like my first couple years of college kind of slacked. But then when I actually got into my degree major and doing the stuff for my degree, I was getting all A's because it was interesting to me. And I kind of explained to him to that. But instead, he viewed it as I was being lazy. I was being lazy in the classes I didn't care about, but the classes I care about, I was giving my best effort. Um, and that's why I would say it was destructive and constructive because he did give the good because he knew where how I learn and how I do things. So I don't think it was coming from an area of like ill-minded intent or to harm me, but he was being very harsh in my decisions that I've made and how my decisions that I'm making now will affect me long term.
Lastly, how does someone know when to ignore a criticism or whether to include it?
I think the best way you can judge when to ignore and when to include it is who is it coming from. Um, One thing my mentor always told me, if you're getting advice from someone, you got to make sure one, you would change places with that person. Two, is that person a good person? And three, is that person genuinely doing what that advice they're giving to you? So if they're not checking out even one of the three, there's no reason for you to listen to them. So if this criticism is coming from someone that's in the same position as you and doing the same things you're doing and still falling short, I wouldn't listen to it. If that person is critiquing you off of things that they don't know the full story for, don't care to know the full story for, don't take that on. Don't hold that to the chest and don't take it too harshly. They just know from what they see. They don't know the whole picture. And lastly, if it's not someone that's senior to you, like your parents or your older brother or a sibling that or someone that's experienced what you're going through in that moment, the critique is coming from not experiencing anything. The critique is coming from what they would do, what they think they would do in your circumstance, instead of what they've actually done if they were in their circumstance. So that critique is not valid because they've never been where you are, if that makes sense.
Ken, thank you for this discussion.